Hey everybody, in today's video I'm going to be showing you how I made these diorama style tents for either dioramas or your D&D campaigns. I'll also showcase the first iterations and how I failed and what not to do basically. So without further ado, let's get started. So I first started off thinking I could use some rags or a cloth type material. I tried it more than a few times and it wasn't that successful. My idea was to use the foam to hold the skewers and kind of glue the cloth to the skewers and then lift it out. I tried that and then it all just fell apart and I had to come up with some other way to do it. So my other idea was just to use foam. However, I didn't have a lot of foam to make a full piece, so I just started with the base and added the skewers to the corners. I did have to tape them so that they would dry, but it did turn out pretty well. I ended up making 2 of these in the end. Now I added a piece of cardboard in the center on the inside of the tent so that I could add a skewer and that it would stay secure inside for the middle tent pole. And I of course added glue in the center of that. Of course I added glue to make sure it stayed. I made sure I found center and centered it, of course, to the best of my ability. Just using some simple white glue in order to keep the tent pole secure. Let that dry. You don't have to wait overnight. You can wait maybe a few hours, but anyways, I decided to add a bit of cardboard on top of the skewers just near the top of the tent poles so they would have a little bit more structure. I also ended up using the paper towel as the cloth and then adding glue onto it in order to keep it from moving and hardening up. I also added one more layer on top just to cover the rest of the tent because it wasn't quite big enough in order to cover the size of it, so I had to add an extra layer onto it. Now adding more glue onto the side just to harden it up a little bit more, and it just spread it around. It worked quite well in my opinion. Now I left these over the register overnight on this grate and it actually works pretty well in my opinion. Now adding a half layer on top of on one of the sides just to make some doors or some tent flaps. I ended up gluing them in the end, gluing them open. Right now I'm going to be using a kind of a higher end spray painting, pot spray painter or a siphon sprayer, only because my other spray kits weren't working and it was just taking too long. Should have worn gloves, but I didn't. I ended up using wood glue instead of white glue to hold these tent ropes on. And it may have been a mistake because I had to go over with paint and touch them up a little bit more. However, off camera I decided to paint them all up and just give them a little bit of more detail. For the base, I decided to give it a little bit of a curve and then add some foam as a base to it. Using just some simple white glue and just spraying it thinly and across the entire piece of the foam and then taping it to make sure it would stick. And it worked out pretty well. Now adding the glue on top for the grass and doing the same thing I did underneath. Just spread it out, even coat, make sure everywhere gets glue, a little bit harder with all the rope and stuff. I started off with the dark grass instead. Did a couple layers of this first before I moved on to the light grass. And then I decided to do a little bit more detail by adding some yellow grass and dead grass into the mix there. I added the bright green light grass to just, just the cup corners, just lightly spread it on so you can lightly see it and not overload the dark grass. Same with the yellow grass, I only added just to various spots. And then off camera, I added a few extra things off to the side. Alright everybody, this is going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. It turned out great. I love the little details that I added on the wood and the fireplace or the fire pit. The ropes on the tent look pretty good. And there's maybe a few things I would change. But that's going to do it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time.